Please give it up for Aaron Abt.
Hello, hello. Does this work? Yes. So welcome to my talk about how we made a game about half of a head using both vertical and horizontal slicing. My name is Aaron. I'm a game designer from Switzerland. I graduated in the game design course of the Zurich University of the Arts a few years ago, and now I'm creating games at Lululu Entertainment, a studio which I co-founded. During most of the time, I've also been creating VR and AR apps as a part-time work at an agency called Ateo. At Lululu, we are 4 friends who met each other at the studies at the ZHDK, and we're working with a few freelancers, namely for writing and audio. We're working at the Swiss Game Hub, games incubator and co-working space in Zurich. And all of the team is working part-time on these games, as we couldn't make a full living of the games yet. The 2 games that we've made are Boomerang, a local multiplayer boomerang fighting game, and the recently released Henry Halfhead. Let's watch the trailer for Henry.
Welcome. This is Henry. If Henry's anything, they're, well, everything. And that's how Henry lives everyday life. Henry grows up being a curious explorer and loves playing with everything around him. The world is Henry's playground. As Henry grows older, they learn about responsibilities and that life is not only fun and games. Or is it? Help Henry be curious and playful again. And find joy in the simple things in life. Grow old with Henry. Double the Henry, double the fun. Play Henry's not so ordinary everyday life in co-op mode. Henry Halfhead.
Yeah, so, thank you. We call Henry Halfhead a sandboxy adventure game, and importantly for this talk, in the game you follow a linear story throughout Henry's life. Like our studio, the game originated in our studies 7 years ago, actually. My colleagues Tim and Leander had 3 months to create a game about a character with a superpower, but also some kind of disadvantage. And from there came the idea of the bodiless Henry, who can use everyday objects' bodies to interact in everyday life. And that uni prototype already featured the central object possession mechanic. It had just 1 room with a list of cryptic achievements to hunt, and a narrator who commented your actions. The visual style was already quite well defined back then. And 3 years later, after our team had created this other game, Boomerang, we were looking for a next project and decided to pick up Henry again and make it into a full game. We didn't anticipate at that time that it would take us 4 years. 4 years of part-time work, to be fair. The development went through 3 major phases. The creation of a vertical slice, where we created a 15-minute polished game loop. Then we created the full game story of 2.5 hours in a really rough way, the horizontal slice. And then just built out the full game along the structure of the horizontal slice with the envisioned quality and feel of the vertical slice. And in this talk, I want to focus on our experience with these 2 slicing phases that were essential for that last finishing phase then to go quite smoothly. Starting with the vertical slice, a concept which is quite well known, I think, and broadly applied in game development. For us, it is a short excerpt of the game, usually rather from the middle of the game than, let's say, the first tutorial level, focusing on the core experience that you want in the game. It is usually quite polished, conveying the envisioned final state of the game. In a slice, you answer core questions about your game. What does it play like? What does it look and sound like? And how does it get made? The vertical slice is not really the method how you answer those questions, but making one forces you to answer them. And the slice then documents and communicates your answers. When we set out to create a vertical slice for Henry, we wanted to transform the game loop from that first prototype to expand into a full game that would support telling a story. It would have more linear narrative progression and less of the free-form achievement hunting of the old prototype. But we wanted to keep some of that sandbox fun. And also we wanted to just refine the style and feel of the game, find a workflow with the slightly grown team, and in the end have a polished demo to pitch to publishers and find funding. Again, how we got to those answers is not linked to the concept of a vertical slice. We just used various prototyping and brainstorming techniques, iterated a lot, and discarded stuff that did not work. What is linked to a vertical slice is stuff that we left out that you'd usually do when creating a game. So we had no real story introduction. We threw you right into the action of the level. We did do a tutorial, but it was in a separate abstract scene, basically a glorified control screen. We had no real settings menu, no localization. The game ran on a good gaming PC, but was not optimized for anything else, really. And it had no save game feature. The result was a vertical slice where, compared to the old prototype, now you had a linear progression through 3 small rooms. And in each room, you had a couple of tasks to complete before the next one would appear. The narrator was now way more involved, guiding you through the level and introducing each room's scenario. The sandbox aspect was still there, with quite a few optional objects and interactions to explore and toy around with. And while we already liked the visual style of the game, we refined it a bit, adding some highlights to the otherwise very flat cel shading look, and our composer Lucien created the first original soundtrack, which would define the musical style of the game. There were also some more subtle learnings along the way, like that creating linear content was more time-consuming than we thought, and it did cut back our ability to create dense sandboxes. But we were happy to see that playtesters really liked that feeling of progress through a level, and they still appreciated the remaining sandbox feeling that was still there. Early, we set out to find a way to animate a few of the hero objects to make them feel more alive when possessed. But as time went on, we just noticed that heavily relying on very physical movement where things could tumble and fall around and adding some joints that would automatically wiggle was already really expressive and way more time efficient. So no cursed fork running around in the game anymore, unfortunately. Also, we learned that while Tim, our artist, was the only one creating art, he could pump out models so fast for this simple style that programming was still our #1 bottleneck. And as Tim can do some basic programming, he early on started to help the team out with these kinds of tasks and continued to do so throughout production. Yeah, so we created a vertical slice. We're quite happy with the vision that it could tell, and decided to pitch it to publishers to find funding. We pitched it to nearly 50 and got overall very enthusiastic feedback, especially about the state of the vertical slice. Unfortunately, we didn't land a deal in the end, but decided to, well, we think it was mostly due to the high development budget working from Switzerland, combined with the difficulty to make sales estimates for a game that's not really in a clearly defined genre. But we decided to continue development anyways in a smaller scope and just finish something and get it out there while financing ourselves with our part-time work. Shortly after, we ended up getting in touch with Pop Agenda, who co-published with us and did the marketing for the game, which was really awesome. So what next? How do we take this vertical slice, these fun 15 minutes, and expand it into a story that we want to tell? The story at that point was really just an abstract on paper with a storyboard. We wanted to tell a story of losing one's childlike curiosity and playfulness while growing up, and that Henry, as an adult, rediscovers that part of themselves just as they are stuck in a monotonous work-life routine. We could have gone ahead and just created each level, like the vertical slice, bit by bit, but we have had some questions lingering around, like how many scenes would there be per chapter, and how long would they be for the right pacing, and how would the gameplay evolve as the story progressed. And we talked about how for an animated movie, one would often first create an animatic, so just a couple of roughly sketched images every couple of seconds to answer such questions by creating the full-length movie like that, before committing to meticulously create every frame in the final quality. And we wanted to do something similar, a horizontal slice this time. It should let you walk through the story in game form interactively, focusing on the overarching narrative and pacing. And compared to the vertical slice, which was quite polished, this time the moment-to-moment execution could stay quite crude to produce it fast. So as we went ahead producing these chapters like that, we started from a story beat on paper, brainstormed ideas for the concrete setting, level layouts, gameplay ideas, and more story details. Often, we'd first create a layout in-engine and just walked through it with our Henry avatar, role-playing what we'd imagined to happen. And then we'd prototype that to make it interactive using various shortcuts. So for example, for art, we'd often just reuse or repurpose models from the vertical slice or create very primitive ones. For music and sound, we also just reused what we had from the vertical slice or skipped it altogether at times. We programmed really hacky code, the story logic lived in simple update loops, and we used engine features that were just easy to use. For new game mechanics, we did really simplified implementations before we fleshed them out later. Or we just role-play them, having the narrator hint at what would happen in a scene. For the narrator dialogue, we often just wrote it directly when writing the story logic in code. We would later iterate it with our external writer. And for the voiceover, we just used text-to-speech. For the school level, this looked a bit like that. School level video, please.
Oh welcome, Henry Halfhead has decided to join the class after all. This morning, we start with math. Here are your exercise sheets. Oh no. It looks like Henry forgot their pens again.
So, really rough, but you got the sense of what would happen in that scene and how the story would get told. And so we did that for every of the 5 chapters that we wanted to have, and finally had the full story playable in these 2.5 hours. And that was a really amazing experience to finally, for the first time, being able to really grasp what the journey would be like going through the game. And we were really happy with it. Next was time to see whether others felt the same. We did a call for playtesters and let around 15 people play through that whole story, asking them what they thought about the story. Did they got it at all? How did they feel about the pacing and the narrative arc? And whether they felt like the gameplay themes matched those of the story scenes. And mostly, they got the story and they liked it. Nice, it worked. Also, they said that the gameplay did match the narrative moments, although some levels worked better than others. The childhood level, for example, worked really well already, and it's the one that didn't change all that much in the final game. Others, less so. It could also be due to the low fidelity and density of the gameplay in this horizontal slice, but still it gave us an idea of what to focus on when iterating it. In the school level, for example, players really liked the fantasy of that level, but they were really longing for causing more mischief in school. So in the final game, we added way more opportunities for that. We made the interaction in the work level very repetitive on purpose. And players said, yeah, it was kind of annoying to play, but I didn't feel dragged down by this monotonous work as Henry. And so in the final game, we made the Henry character move a bit slower in those scenes, and we were able to add way more of that feeling through music and visual mood. Or in the old age chapter, players understood, yeah, Henry is old now, but I didn't feel old exactly. And in the final game, we made Henry's vision blurred and hearing muffled until players found the glasses and hearing aids in the apartment. That one was quite funny. Then two bigger points that resulted in major changes to the structure or story of the game. One of them was that very early on it was clear that it was a design constraint that we don't want to have any living beings in the game or have Henry interact with any living objects. And we knew that that could make the game a bit, well, dead at times. But we didn't anticipate that many players would voice a strong feeling of loneliness and were kind of weirded out by that after a few chapters. And thanks to the horizontal slice and the roughness and flexibility of it all, we could remedy that by adding a side character to the story. Henry's pen pal, Quinn, who they get to know in school, exchanging secret notes in class. And Henry, as an adult, picks up contact again and exchanges artworks with Quinn. And in the old age chapter, players can find various artifacts of this continued friendship. Another one was how the whole chapter 4 was structured. We imagined it as a big level with many rooms where you'd have to use items from many rooms together to solve a given task. Sounded fun on paper, but was way too complicated and overwhelmed players. At the same time, the story told how Henry finally takes some time off work and has an urge to try out activities which they haven't done in a long time. But one playtester was very direct. This level felt like a stressful weekend full of chores. Again, here we could react by restructuring the level due to everything being still so flexible. We made Henry find an apple seed in the previous chapter, and this chapter now started with planting it in the garden and Henry wishing it to grow into a full tree. The narrator explains that Henry has to be a bit patient now and can spend time doing whatever. From that point on, the level pretty much opens up and you can go wherever you want with a bunch of isolated activities in each room. After each completed activity, the tree grows a bit, giving players a sense of narrative purpose and progression in this level. We also cut a whole room as at that point time was running out a bit. After a few completed activities, the tree was fully grown and players could leave the level if they felt like it. Yeah, so those were major changes that we could only make because things were still so rough and flexible and we could still move things around. And we were really happy that we did it that way and could react on it. But there were some challenges with working like that. For one, it was not very motivating working this, well, ugly for a long time. And the content that we produced was not very photogenic for early marketing. Also, we could not spread out final production work over the whole production, so especially our collaborators for writing and music were put on hold quite a bit during that phase, until we could give them the final game structure to work within. And obviously, there's some overhead in reworking placeholders and hacky content that you've created. And sometimes gauging playtesters' feedback was a bit hard to know whether they disliked a part of the game because of the crude implementation or the core idea behind it. Yeah, but at some point the horizontal slice was done and we iterated those pain points and it was time to finalize the game. Lots of placeholder assets got replaced by final ones. We iterated the mood of the scenes to match the story moments. And just created way more density, be it in more optional objects to play around with, some cosmetics that you could find, and way more narrator reactions to all the things that you could explore in the world. And at some point, the game was done. And it came out this September, and we were really happy about it. To recap, we created a vertical slice to answer core design questions about the game and the production workflow. And the slice documented those answers and our vision that we could use for pitching to publishers, for example. The horizontal slice was really useful to explore some stuff in the linear narrative of our game, like testing the overarching progression and pacing of the narrative and the gameplay. And it was a strong framework to then finalize the game upon. I think we wouldn't use this for a less linear game or a game that's very system heavy or mechanics heavy, as there we'd think it would be risky to delay the final implementation details until the end of production. The vertical slice, we think, is something we do for any game, and most people do it usually. Yeah, so that's about it. Thank you so much for coming to my talk.